Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa Lyons, creator of Navigating Autism and Eat to Heal Autism. And this video is a special request video. I have a previous video on how children with autism can technically pass a hearing test, but yet still not hear and have big problems related to speech based upon their lack of hearing. So parents asked me, what kind of hearing tests are there? And that's what this video is. Hearing and speech concerns. So if you suspect your child with autism has a hearing problem, even though they might be able to pass a hearing test, you more than likely are right. Loss or lesser functioning of the inner ear can cause reduced ability to discriminate between two sounds or also impaired auditory tuning. What this means is a child technically can hear, but with the inner ear loss of function, what happens is the child can't discriminate between two sounds. So two vowels, they sound the same. So if you ever say something to your child and they look at you like, I know you said something, but I have no idea what you just said, this is the problem I'm addressing with this video. So it's true, even if a regular hearing test shows no hearing loss, there still can be loss of hearing function. It's important to know the different kinds of hearing tests to have. So let's learn from the past. So many times there's information that we learn, but we don't pass it on to others. So here's something that Temple Grandin herself learned, and I want to share it with you so that you can learn from her. So her quote is, I had problems getting my words out. If people spoke directly to me, I understood what they said. But when the grown-ups got to yakking really fast by themselves, it just sounded like oi oi. I thought grown-ups had a separate language. I've now figured out that I was not hearing the hard consonant sounds. This is what Temple Grandin learned herself. I'm going over research, and in the previous video, I showed the actual research that quantifies this difficulty with hearing. So let's get into hearing and autism. It's important to know this information. Some of the earliest signs of autism involve auditory processing. Recent research showed that certain hearing thresholds in children with autism were significantly related to receptive and expressive language measures. That means the children's hearing affected their receptive language, so what they heard, as well as their expressive language, what they spoke. So many times speech issues are related to hearing issues. So it's important to just examine everything so that you can hear your child speak. This research also showed that inner ear hearing around the 1 kilohertz region in those with autism also impairs speech perception as well as comprehension in challenging environments. Right? That quote from Temple Grandin said, when the adults spoke to her directly, she had no problem. But then when it was, a lot of people yapping all at once, she couldn't separate out the different sounds. I do want to caution just to say that hearing loss is not causative for autism. Hearing loss is more of a comorbidity. It's something to be thoroughly investigated to make sure your child can hear all of the different sounds, can discriminate the different sounds. It's important for their comprehension, so for their success in school, as well as their ability to communicate. And we all want to hear our children talk. A quick overview on the ear. So there's the inner, middle, and outer ear. Here's a figure that depicts it. I'm not going to go into details with all the different bones, and you can see the figure here. There's an outer ear, a middle ear, and an inner ear. The information has to be passed effortlessly from the outer to the middle to the inner ear, and then also to the brain. So a lot of nerves get involved. Let's talk about a typical hearing test. So a pure tone hearing test is what many of us experienced as children. And this pure tone hearing test, it measures the softest or least audible sound that a person can hear. Basically, you put on the headphones, you listen for a beep, and you raise your hand when you heard the beep. This is the classic hearing test. With this test, however, the person must be able to communicate. So you must be able to raise your hand when you hear a sound. Not so easy for many of our children with autism. So thankfully, a pure tone test can be done 2 other ways. So there's conditioned play, and that is when your child will do something every time they hear a sound. So they hear a sound and then they go and put something, a block in a box, something along those lines. There's also visual reinforcement. This is used a lot with children with autism. So they're in a sound booth, there's a noise, and your child looks towards the direction of the sound. And then in that area, there's like a little clown that pops up or a flashing light, something fun and engaging. And this rewards the children for looking towards the sound when they hear it. So this is how a hearing test can be modified. Again, this is just pure tone. Can they hear the sound? That's it. The middle ear. Middle ear problems make getting the sound from the outer ear and into the inner ear and brain difficult. Middle ear issues happen a lot with younger children. All types of younger children, not just autism. So there are 3 tests for determining middle ear function, and all of them do not require the person taking the test to communicate. These are the 3 types of middle ear hearing tests. Tympanometry. This is a test, and it's a probe. The probe looks like an earphone, a little earbud, and it gets put into the ear, and there's a little puff of air that happens. Air is moved, and therefore you can measure eardrum movement. So the eardrum is the big focus of the middle ear. This test can also detect ear infections based on eardrum movement. So this is certainly a very important test to have if you have questions, does my child have an ear infection? I don't know, we're not really sure. This is the kind of test that you want. Your child does not have to give any type of feedback to get information about their eardrum movement, as well as if there's an ear infection. There's another test called the acoustic reflex. And in the ear, in the middle ear, right, we're focusing on the middle ear, there's a muscle that tightens when there's a loud sound. It's a reflex. You cannot control this. You cannot stop the muscle contraction. You cannot start it if you wanted to. This test will measure how loud the sound has to be before the reflex occurs. And this is a great test to help with determining hearing loss. Overall, general hearing loss. And again, the probe looks like an earphone. It just gets put in the ear very quickly. And overall, it's a pretty simple test. The third test is the static acoustic. And this measures the physical volume of air in the ear. This can detect, let's say, a perforated eardrum. It can also check the openness of tubes in the ear, if there are tubes in the ear. So again, this is really important for middle ear function. Let's get to the inner ear test. So this is a really interesting test. In the inner ear, there are these tiny hairs that change in length depending on the sound waves. It's absolutely fascinating. And what happens is when the hair lengths change, that actual change in the length produces its own sound, and we can actually measure that. I have another video on my channel that explains more into the details about how hearing loss in those with autism, specifically in the inner ear, can result in a child not being able to discriminate between different sounds. Even if your child passes that pure tone, that regular hearing test, they still can have hearing issues. So this is the inner ear test that you would like to have done for your child if you have concerns about them being able to discriminate between different sounds. Also, if a child has speech problems, this would be a great test to explore. Again, a small earphone is placed in the ear and measures the sound that comes back. Overall, a pretty simple test to have done. There's a little bit further, so this now goes into the inner ear and the brain test. This is looking at the brainstem response. So this test is a little bit more complicated. The child has to lay still or be asleep. This test measures how well each ear can pick up sounds, and it also tells how well the hearing nerve sends the information to the brain. So this test is looking at that interface between the end of the inner ear and the brain. So it's getting more into nerves. Electrodes are put on the head and the skin. They record brainwave activity in response to different sounds that are heard through earphones. And again, the child must be still or asleep, but no communication is needed from them to do the test. Some hospitals allow you to kind of batch these tests together. So if your child's going in for, let's say, some type of maybe MRI or some dental work, you can also bundle in these hearing tests. So if you do have to sedate your child, think about all the different things that can be done, then work with a large hospital system to batch those appointments together. You don't want to necessarily be giving your child sedation medication for 3 or 4 or 5 different appointments. Batch it all together. Here are some references, and again, hearing is so important. There's so much more to hearing than just hearing a sound and being able to pass that pure tone hearing test. Really work with your healthcare team and explore overall hearing for your child, because it relates so much to speech, and there's scientific evidence already showing that children with autism do not hear in certain regions, and that actually affects their speech.